Welcome to the social roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. It is Friday. We've come to the end of the week. Tell us how your day has been so far. And are you excited about the weekend? Because to be honest, I am super duper excited for the weekend just to take that break after, a long week of working and, taking the time to myself and just taking a breather. So, what are you up to on your weekend? Do comment and do let us know what you are hoping to do during this weekend and how your Friday has been so far. And let me just tell you, we're just starting the day, right? It's early in the morning, it's 9 o'clock, and if you are up, well, you've done a good job so far. You've gotten up early in the morning, you've convinced yourself to get out of bed, and we are going to take you on a little journey right here on the social roundup. We have some interesting topics that we're going to be discussing here, and we'd love to hear what you think about them as well. So feel free to comment on our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube as well, and engage with us. Tell us what you want to hear from us and tell us what you think about these topics. And if you just want to, maybe just talk with us, do join us. You can call us up as well. And we'd love to have you download our app on your phone and you can be with us 24/7 because we bring content to you from all kinds of topics, all kinds of themes. And we're here to give you what exactly you are looking for. With that being said, we have something very important right now that we need to be discussing that we are hoping to talk about right here on the social roundup. Now, for those who have no idea what we're going to be, what refugee crisis is, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about, the refugee crisis in the world. And this is something that is really pressing, that is really important, that needs a lot of attention. And before we even talk about the issue, we need to make sure we're aware about what this is. And that is the biggest mistake I think we make as of now, 2021. We see a lot of people, give their opinion on, what side or taking political sides, when it comes to certain situations. But the thing is that we don't take the time to actually learn about what the problem really is. And that really is problematic because we need to be taking the time to understand what the actual problem is and what is happening before we actually take a side or before we actually, give our opinion. So that is exactly what we're going to be doing right here on the social roundup with Sala on Relax Radio. Now, with that being said, a refugee is someone that you need to understand is very different from an asylum seeker and a migrant, right? They all have a little bit of, different meanings, and we tend to, get confused with the meanings. So we need to make sure that we are learning about it before we actually talk about it, right? Now, with refugees, the people fleeing from armed conflicts or persecutions, right? And this is the basic definition, that people who are fleeing their country because there's some sort of problem within their country, that there's some sort of armed conflict that is happening and their life is in danger. And that is exactly why they have decided to flee their country, right? And in most situations they would flee to a neighboring country or somewhere close, a country that is actually, close to their country, seeking that sort of assistance. And there are organizations, there are states, there are other countries that actually, make sure that they take care of these refugees and they, take care of their needs as well, right? With that being said, there's also international law that specifically focuses on the refugee crisis, like the 1951 Refugee Convention, right? And these laws make sure that, internationally countries are taking the time to actually address the problem, right? Now, what's an asylum seeker? What makes an asylum seeker different from a refugee? An asylum seeker is someone who claims to be a refugee, but whose claims hasn't still been evaluated. Refugee is ultimately when you get the pass, when you've been confirmed as a refugee by the international laws, right? But an asylum seeker is someone who still hasn't been confirmed, someone who is still in the process of being evaluated as to whether they are a refugee or not, right? This person would have applied for asylum on the grounds that returning to his or her country would lead to persecution, right? This could be based on their race, religion, nationality, or even political beliefs, right? So this is someone who's process is still pending, and they ultimately are hoping to be called a refugee or given the status of a refugee, right? And this is what makes a refugee and an asylum seeker different. Now, what is the difference between a migrant and a refugee and asylum seeker, right? A migrant is someone who chooses to move not because of a direct threat or persecution, but because they want to improve their lives. And this is simply, you deciding to move because you want to find work, better education, you want to be reunited with your family. And traveling for these purposes basically makes you a migrant and not a refugee or a asylum seeker, right? With that being said, that is the basic difference between a refugee, an asylum seeker, and a migrant. And the difference between them lies there. Right now, again, you need to understand that a refugee is someone whose life is at threat within their countries, which is exactly why they're moving. And this is why we need to be talking about this problem. This is why we need to be giving this problem attention, right? Because there is some sort of threat to their life, and we need to see what our part is in this situation. Because like I said, like I've constantly brought up this fact about how we are global citizens. Ultimately, we are in an international community. We're no more in that place where you would say, oh well, I belong to this country, this is where I come from, all I need to care about is the problems within my country. Now you need to understand that you are part of an international community, you are a global citizen, and because of that you need to start giving attention to problems that are there internationally. You need to spend time understanding the problems that are happening, and you need to do your part as a global citizen to do whatever it takes to address these problems, right? So this is the basics that you need to keep in mind. With that being said, we have a lot more that we are going to be discussing about the refugee crisis, a lot more that is going to help us get a better understanding about what is happening internationally and where these things are happening as well, where these problems are prominent, is also something that we're going to be going through, right? And we need to keep in mind that different countries have different situations with this problem. There are different countries that face different problems. Now, it's not just that, the people, the refugees themselves, they're not the only ones who face problems in this situation. It is also the countries that host them. It is also the international community that is trying to, give them that support when they are trying to move from unsafe conditions. It is also their country that is going to face a problem. When you have large populations leaving your country, it is definitely something to think about. You have a lot of socio-economic and political problems that come up from it as well, right? Now, we spoke about how a refugee is a person who is outside his or her country of nationality and can't return because, their life is in somehow danger. And this could be because of their religion, nationality, political opinion, membership in a political social group as well, right? And if we look at the numbers, we'd realize that it's actually really, really alarming. It's estimated that 50% of refugees are under the age of 18, which means that they're dependent citizens, and they're actually children who are basically not able to fund themselves, who are not able to take care of themselves. And this is problematic because an adult is going to have to work for them, and they can't survive in this world alone. And that is something to really think about. That is a crisis, that is something we need to be addressing, right? An asylum seeker is a person who is looking to be recognized as a refugee, which is also something that we spoke about, right? And most of the time asylum seekers come from countries like Pakistan and Iran, and we will be going into detail about how where refugees come from, what countries are more common when it comes to refugees as well, right? There are also internally displaced people, who are people who have to leave their homes as a result of armed conflict or violence or human rights violations within their countries, right? So they haven't crossed the international borders, they're within their country, but they're crossing either provinces or districts or states within their country somehow. And that is a little bit different to refugees, because refugees are seeking asylum from outside their country, right? And under international law, refugees are not allowed to be forced back to the countries that they have fled. And that is something that is really important to keep in mind, because we have seen in multiple scenarios where even if you take Greece, when refugees have reached their on board in boats and through traveling through sea, we have seen countries reject them and send them back to their country of origin, which is putting all their lives in danger. So are we really following following the international law, the law that we've been speaking about so far? Are we giving it the due respect that we're supposed to be giving? It is something for us to think about, right? And another thing to keep in mind is that developing countries host 80% of the world's refugees. Now, developing countries are called developing countries because they cannot take care of themselves, because they're still in the process of building themselves. Why are developed countries not playing the part that they're supposed to be playing? Because, ultimately, they're the ones who can afford to take this role up of helping refugees. But we have developing countries who are not self sufficient, who are actually contributing to this process, which is actually making it much more tougher. So we really need to assess ourselves. We need to come to terms with, how we are handling this problem as an international community, right? So we will be going into more details about how this refugee crisis is actually affecting the world, and the different types of challenges that children, refugee children, and refugees in general face in host countries. What are the problems that host countries face, and what can you do about it as well? So we will be going into these details soon, right after this break. We've been talking for some time, and we actually have more coming up as well. So stay tuned with Sala right here on the Social Roundup. Welcome back to the Social Roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. We've been talking about some interesting and important topics right here, and we'd love for you to join in as well. Let us know what you think about these topics. Let us know what we need to be talking about. Is there something that you want us to talk about specifically? Do let us know and join in with this conversation with us right here on Relax Radio, right? With that being said, you can also like us on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube as well. You can watch our videos, join us live as well, even through your devices. You can download our app as well. So stay tuned with us throughout, because we have some interesting content coming your way throughout the day and night as well, right? I also hope you're having an amazing Friday. Let us know how your day has been so far. Are you looking forward to the weekend? Because I really am, right? And do let us know what your plans are for the weekend, because we'd love to try out. If there's something that you want to try out and you want to experiment, do let us know. And if you love to know what the results are, we'd love to hear how it went for you. And we'd also like to try and let you know how it went for us as well. So do comment and stay tuned with us through this process. With that being said, we've been talking about something that is really important and pressing as of now, which is the refugee crisis in the world, right? We spoke about how, with the refugee crisis, there have been multiple problems that we have had to address, right? We spoke about the definition of what who a refugee is, what the difference between a refugee, migrant, and asylum seeker is. And we also spoke about some important things to keep in mind when it comes to the refugees, right? Now, something that we have also learned is that more than 26 million refugees live in host communities, which is probably mostly to do with neighboring countries, right? Which is an alarming number. 26 million refugees. That is not something to take lightly, right? And 68% of the refugees are from five countries. Now, out of 100%, 68% coming from five countries is showing how much of a concern we need to be taking in, these five country situations as well, right? And the UNCHR, which is the Special Committee for Refugees, talks about how, in total, in 2019, we had 36.4 million refugees, and it has increased to 86.5 million during the beginning of 2021, which shows, an alarming doubling. And it is more than twice the number that it was in 2009. This is something to think about, something to take very, very seriously as well, right? When we take a look at the countries that have been having refugees, or countries that refugees come from, we have 10 top countries. From taking the 10th place, Bhutan; ninth place, Eritrea; number 8, Central African Republic; number 7, Sudan; number 6, Democratic Republic of Congo; number 5, Somalia; number 4, the Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar; number 3, South Sudan; number 2, Afghanistan; and number 1 is the Syrian refugee crisis, right? So these are the top 10 countries from which refugees come, and we need to be aware of the situations of these specific countries. Why are refugees coming from these countries? What is causing this need? What is causing them to flee from their own countries? Now, let us take a moment to actually think about this, right? Having to leave the country that you were born in, we have some sort of sentiment attached to the fact that we were born in a certain country, right? We have love and, some sort of attachment. It is a land that you were born in. Everyone has some sort of nationalistic feeling. Now, again, I've spoken about this. I'm not someone who, supports nationalism or patriotism, understanding how fast we're moving towards globalism. And I've also spoken about how, ultimately we are all becoming, possessive over our land, which is definitely making it harder. We're becoming more racist, and we are pushing people out of our country and ill treating them simply because we are fighting over land, right? But again, this is also something to think about. Even with the refugee crisis, we also see that people are fighting over this land, which is exactly why they are being chased out. But what is the attachment you should be having with your country? What is the relationship you should be having with your country, so as to, not have these unhealthy outcomes? Number one is definitely understanding that your country is where you were born, and you need to love this place with all your heart, right? And that is exactly what we will be feeling. We're comfortable there. We know exactly where we need to go. We know the people. We know everyone in the surrounding. And that makes us feel so comfortable within our country. Now, when we're expected to leave our country, we're expected to go to a completely alien place, somewhere we're not familiar with. We don't even know where we can get groceries at that point. We don't know what their language is. We don't know where we can go when we need something. We don't know who to turn to when we need something. And that is really something to think about, because refugees suffer so much. And the thing is, they do not have stability for most of their lives, right? Because they're constantly moving from one place to another, seeking, looking for, some sort of support, and they do not have a home anymore. Now, let me tell you this, as simple as I can make it, just imagine not having a home, right? I'm not saying think about leaving to another country. Imagine just not having a roof over your head, a place that, well, I can go here and sleep, I can go here, have my privacy, I can be with my family. And, sometimes you even lose your family in the process, which is something to really, really think about. The refugees are not having life any easy, and it is something for us to do our part in and help addressing it, right? So it is something to think about. Now, in the process of talking about what sort of problems that the refugees face, apart from having to leave their land, it is also something to keep in mind that some of them are actually stuck in their country and they cannot leave their country as well. Why can't they leave their country? Because there are safety issues, there are safety concerns that come up when they try to leave their country, right? Because they're scared. One is that you never know when you're going to be attacked. That is number one to it. Number two is you do not know what's going to happen when you leave the country, because like I said, some of them have spoken about how they prefer dying in their own land than going out and trying to survive. They that is how much of an attachment they have with their land, with their homeland, with their country, right? And that is something to really, really, really think about, because not being safe in your home, not being safe in that one place that you should be feeling safe in, is something that needs to be addressed, right? So that is the kind of concerns that have been raised when it comes to refugees within their land. And when they do leave, there are other kinds of problems that they start facing as well. So just to take a look at different types of groups that are there in refugees. You see refugees as families, you see children, you see youth groups, you see women, and every kind of group actually has a different problem that they are trying to address, right? Now let's take a look at kids, right? When we take children, number one is definitely limited access to quality education. Now, refugees do not get the same treatment as citizens from this country, the host country, right? And obviously, like we spoke about, how developing countries are the countries that are hosting refugees. What happens is that they don't even have a way to give quality education for their own children, right? And this makes it problematic, because ultimately this means that they're going to have to also find a way to give quality education to refugee children, which becomes problematic, because how are they going to give it to children who get secondary citizen status in comparison to the citizens of your own country, right? So this is definitely something that we need to think about, because even when we think about quality education, this is something that you need. It's an essential for success in life, but this becomes a challenge in refugee emergencies, because that there's a 5 times more likely chance to be for these children to be out of school than other children, right? And this is also because safety, and there are language barriers in the classroom, and financial issues to afford good education as well. So providing quality education is definitely not even a priority for most of these refugee families. They're just trying to make it through a day, be able to get food somehow. And many of these challenges are reality for Syrian children living in Lebanon. Now, for those who have read up on the Syrian situation, and if you haven't, definitely it is something to think about, something we will be talking on the social roundup soon as well. Lebanon is the neighboring country with Syria that hosts most of the Syrians, and the quality of education is a problem that most of the Syrian children face in Lebanon, right? And Lebanon has been hosting over 1 million Syrian refugees, which is a big number, right? And this means that ultimately there are a lot of problems, a lot of complications in providing formal education for the children, and many end up in child labor because they cannot afford the education. They cannot afford to even get good meals during the day, so to make ends meet with their families, they're forced into child labor as well, right? And another problem is that they have to compromise on mental health and the threats of lost childhood. They're expected to grow up immediately because now they have to work, right? They have to work to support their family, and this means that ultimately they do not have that childhood. They do not get to enjoy their childhood, which is really, really heartbreaking if you really think about it, because these children, like, every child deserves that childhood. Every child deserves that sort of good childhood, healthy childhood, and they're supposed to compromise on mental health because they have to put up with this, right? And it takes it all on their mental health emotionally, and they end up with very, very severe trauma growing up, right? Because they have been growing up in armed conflict areas, and they have deep mental scars that are often overlooked, right? So this is something to think about as well. This is something that children in these regions face as well, right? And this past trauma is something that we need to think about addressing when it comes to addressing the refugee crisis. Another thing that is also a problem among children in the refugee crisis is separation from families and greater vulnerability. Now, when you are a child, you need your parents, you are dependent on them, right, to a very, very huge extent. Not having that is just really, really, really hard, right? And you being separated from your family and, being exposed to that greater vulnerability is something that needs to be addressed, because, ultimately, being separated from your parents means that you don't have that support. And your parents are going to be there for you whatever happens. You need that love, you need that protection, you need to feel safe somewhere. Children cannot be expected to take care of themselves by themselves, right? So it is something that ultimately becomes a problem. 300,000 unaccompanied and separated children were registered in 80 countries over the course of 2 years. Now, this is an alarming number that we need to be thinking about. This is not a normal number to take lightly as well, right? So we need to be giving attention to this violence, the exploitation and abuse that these children are being subjected to. And young girls can be the target of gender-based violence and trafficking as well within these regions, because ultimately, these regions are dangerous regions that are prone to more violence than other regions. And young children are prone to child labor, being used as part of the forces. And also trafficking is something that they face as well, right? Shifting family dynamics and responsibilities is another problem that children face, because ultimately, when parents cannot take care of the younger siblings, children start taking on that responsibility, earning for the family, working towards providing for the family, taking care of their younger siblings. These are all problems that refugee children face as well. And also isolation in host community. Now, children would have made friends, like we spoke about, how you have a life in your own country, you are in control of your life in your own country. But here you have the problem, because ultimately you do not have that childhood, you do not have the people that about, right, that you can turn to when you need something. And children, especially in refugee crisis situations, have a much bigger attention that we need to be giving to. That is a problem that we need to be giving a lot of attention to as well. With that being said, we've been talking for some time about the refugee crisis, and we will be talking about more problems that the refugees face in host countries and how you can make your impact as well, because ultimately we're discussing the problem to get to a solution right here on the social roundup. You have a role to play as an international citizen, so let's focus on that. Let's see what you can do about it as well. With that being said, let's go for a small break. This is Sala on the social roundup right here on Relaks Radio.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be? So that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're
Yeah.
always evaluating what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. so,
Absolutely.
that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country. To be fair, different countries have different tax laws, so different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly one because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. But yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on air, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Welcome back to the Social Roundup right here on Relax Radio. This is Sala, and we have some amazing topics that we will be talking about right here on Relax Radio. So do stay tuned. And we have been actually talking about the refugee crisis, the international refugee crisis that has been taking place. And we've been talking about, the different impacts it has on the different communities, how children in the refugee groups suffer. And we also spoke about how, what a refugee is, what a migrant is, what an asylum seeker is. We've been taking the time to understand this problem, which is exactly what we do here right on the Social Roundup from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And so do stay tuned with us, and do let us know what you would like to hear, what you think about these problems as well. Do feel free to comment on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Twitch as well. Let us know what you think, and we'll love to have you join in. Follow us and stay tuned with us as well. With that being said, let's go into some of the problems, some challenges that are faced by the refugees in host countries, right? Now, when you look at refugees, they have different kinds of problems, and we've been talking about how, refugee children face some sort of problems when they go into these crisis situations as well, right? Now let's look at, in general, what are the problems that refugees face, right? The main problems that they face is the difficulty in speaking and learning the language of the host country. Now we need to understand that, a huge population, right? Now if you take Lebanon, you have 1 million Syrian refugees there. They've got to learn the language of the host country, which becomes really, really problematic. How do they learn it? Then they're just out of this, crisis situation, and they need to find ways to, earn money. They need to find ways to survive, get through a day, and they are expected to learn a language through this situation, right? Just to simply survive. And that is something that doesn't happen overnight, and that is something that they actually suffer with, right? This is a problem. This is a real problem that people face, and this is something that needs to be addressed, something that we need to think about as well. Another problem is raising children and helping them succeed in school. We spoke about how, when it comes to refugee children, the problem that they face is that they do not have a good childhood. They miss out on their childhood to the point where they don't even have quality education, which is a serious problem, because because you need to have that sort of quality education to, ultimately become a successful citizen in the future, and, even be able to get a job and, earn for your family. And here we have, people not being able to help their children, support their children through their education, because they simply can't even afford to get a meal for a day, right? This is something that is a problem, which actually leads to the third problem, which is securing work. Finding a job is so difficult because you have this influx of refugees coming into a host country, right? And you have people from the host countries themselves, the citizens of the host countries, who suffer to maintain their jobs. And even we've seen citizens of host countries complain about, how ultimately they have to had, lost job opportunities because refugees take up their job. And as much as, this is heartbreaking, we need to understand that both citizens, refugees as well as the citizens of the host countries, are facing some sort of problem out of this. Securing work has been hard one for the refugees because, now they need to find a way to live and survive through this situation, in this new country, in this new environment, which has been really tough on them. But also, citizens of the host country also find it really hard because now their jobs are being taken away by refugees, right? So this is something else that we need to be thinking about as well, right? Another problem that they face is securing housing, because, ultimately what happens is that, you need to find places to stay in as well, space to stay in as well, right? Affordable housing is expensive ultimately, and, they get low paying jobs that do not help them enough to, be able to afford this housing as well. For that reason, large families actually choose to live together, right? And this is actually very, very stressful, noisy, and hardly conducive to study or rest as well, right? They live in groups, and refugees have had no privacy, no sort of, that safe comfort of feeling of being at home. That feeling is not there anymore for them, which is actually really, really problematic as well, right? And then they become victim to exploitation from landlords as well. Now, if we take in Utah, there was a situation, where refugees from Myanmar were forced to live in apartments, and, known to have they have been living in rooms in spaces with bed bugs, and their landlords have not done anything about it as well, right? So this is something to think about as well, because, ultimately they get exploited because people know what sort of situation they're coming from. They know the fact that they can't afford to, be addressing or be able to complain about these problems, because they have a bigger problem of, actually not being able to go back to their home country. They need to find ways to survive in this country, and this is not something that they can be complaining about as well, right? Another problem is actually accessing services, because, like we spoke about it, they do not know where to go. This is a new environment. They need to learn again from the beginning. They need to learn everything that they've been learning, how where to go get legal guidance, where to go for legal advice. Simply not being able to speak the language means that they don't even know how to take transport, where to go for transport. Those are real issues that we need to be talking about when it comes to refugee crises, because, ultimately we focus on, just simply getting them out of the country that they are in trouble with. But what happens when we resettle them, when we actually, get them to a host country? What are the kind of problems that they face there? That is something that we need to be really, really thinking about. And let's not even get started on accessing mental health issues, because this is something that really, really is problematic, right? Because, like I said, I really don't understand why the world actually prioritizes physical health over mental health. Mental health is something that we need to be giving attention to too. But I understand that in this situation, simply getting them out of this violence, out of this country, is more important. But at the same time, we need to be doing whatever it takes to, sort of address their mental health, because these refugees and immigrants have been exposed to violence, torture, and even in some cases rape. Like we've been talking about how, they've been, exposed to trafficking as well. So they need that extra help, right? And ultimately, mental health issues are taboo in many cultures, creating an additional barrier for those needs as well. So we need to be prioritizing mental health and understanding that these cultural barriers cannot get in the way, right? Another problem that the community faces is transportation. This is something that we, touched on, but we didn't talk in detail about. Transportation is definitely something that, they've been facing a lot of problems with, because now with transportation, like we spoke about this, refugees do have a problem with language, number one, and then even with obtaining a driving license, whether documented or not, is extremely difficult for multiple reasons, right? Now, one is that they need a translator, and that is not easy to do as well. And the driver must be literate in order to pass the written exam as well. So they can't obtain a driver's license, and when it comes to ultimately taking public transportation as well, they have a language barrier as well, right? So this is something that we really, really need to think about, something that we really need to take seriously and do whatever it takes to sort of help with this problem as well. And we spoke about cultural barriers, but let's go into actually let's think about this problem even more, right? Now, when it comes to cultural barriers, it's not just to do with not knowing the language, not knowing what to say in what situation, or it's not just about simply not understanding things, right? It's also from things like attire to food to lifestyle to what is appreciated. Everything really, really matters. There's a huge cultural barrier when you go from your home country to another country. Now, let me tell you this, right? As someone I absolutely love traveling, and I've been traveling for the most part. And I do not only travel within the country, but I also travel internationally. And I know that cultures from different countries are very, very different. As someone who's, traveled to multiple countries in the Middle East, in the western side, eastern side of the world, I know that, when I go to these different countries, I need to change how I dress just to feel like, everyone doesn't think I'm alien, right? Like, oh, that's kind of different. That's not normal here, right? And if I am someone who, is just going on a visit, just for a couple of days, just traveling and, actually having fun, immersing in their culture, I genuinely can't even imagine what it must be like for people who are expected to resettle into those cultures and make it part of their life, right? And it is something that we really need to think about, for someone to leave what is their home, their culture, leave all of that behind and go to a new place and accept their culture, accept their lifestyle, their language, their food, how they dress, to change everything and to not be judged by the citizens of the host country is an actual problem. It is something that, ultimately refugees have been facing as a problem in the host countries. And we need to start giving this more attention. And we also need to think about how the youth have lost their lifestyle over the years in these host countries. And, ultimately they're supposed to just adjust to these situations and just put up with it. And that really is not okay, right? We will be going into details of how you can make a change, because we've been talking about this problem. We've been talking about how there is a refugee crisis that needs to be addressed, and we've been looking into the problem with definitions, with understanding what a refugee crisis is, looking at the alarming numbers, problems that children face, that the refugees in general face in host countries. We also need to go and look into what you can do, because there is hope. Trust me, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Now you as a global citizen have a huge role to play, and let me tell you, if we get together and if we all do our part, we can be able to address this problem. With giving you that hope, I am going to go into a small break right here on the Social Roundup, and we will be back, and let's talk about what you can do about the refugee crisis.
Climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
They're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that would improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation? Especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again. It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It'll make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when you if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there, you're quite right.
I mean, I've been doing this for quite some time. I mean, hey, you'll get the hang of it.
Yeah, I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
Welcome back to the Social Roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. And just want to remind you that you can join us 24/7. Stay tuned with Relax Radio right here, because we are going to give you content of all topics and of all interests. Whatever you may be interested in, do let us know what you'd love to hear from us as well. You can follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and you can comment and let us know on Twitch as well. We'd love to hear what you think about what we have to offer to you, and tell us how your day has been going, because it is Friday. We've come to the end of the week and we have a weekend to look forward to as well. With that being said, we're actually coming to the end of the first show, and we have more interesting content coming up. Right after this, we have Andrea joining us as well, and we will be talking about some interesting important facts that we need to be going through as well. And we've been talking about the refugee crisis right here, and we are going to finally close the show with some positive energy. We're going to be looking at what you can do to help with the refugee crisis as global citizens, as people who want to be seeing that change in this world. Right now, if you are willing to, you can definitely provide your home, provide the space within your home, and host refugees and asylum seekers. Right now, let me tell you this, definitely, if you have a spare room in your house, if you feel like you can handle that, and if you feel like even spending that extra time to talk to someone, teach them that new language, and it's a good experience. Like to be honest, I've never had a refugee in my house or in my household, but I've had volunteers stay at my place. And one thing that I've learned is that, that relationship, that new person from a new culture, sharing that sort of relationship is actually so good. And it's that positive energy, right? Just being able to spend time with them, teaching them that language, spending time to get to know someone, socializing is actually good for you. It's healthy for you. So having someone in your household with that spare room, offering that space for them, is definitely something that you can do as well. Number two is you can volunteer, and you can actually visit these countries, take some time to go and help them out in these situations as well. Now for me, I've been wanting to do this for the longest time, and I'm hopefully, I do not want to jinx it, I will be able to do it. I was not able to do it because because of the whole pandemic situation, but I'm hoping at some point in my life I will get to go and volunteer sometime, and be able to help out with the refugee crisis internationally. And this is something that you can do as well. Take your friends along with you, take them and do this together. You can go teach them a language, you can actually help out with the situation. There's so many roles that you can play. You can volunteer this time to help them, right? can be any specific skill that you're good at as well. I've seen on Instagram a lot of volunteers even do things like, teach horse riding, which is very therapeutic for children there, for refugees, right? So these are things that you can definitely do. And you can also help refugees to integrate into this new culture, into this, new lifestyle that you have been accustomed to, that they may not be accustomed to. So definitely give that time to teach them the new language, teach them what life is like there as well. Encourage your university to offer refugee scholarships. Now you need to understand that as students or, lecturers, you have so much power within your universities and colleges. So definitely take the time to push to offer scholarships within your universities to refugees, because honestly they deserve that, right? They deserve that extra support, that financial support, because they are willing to thrive, they're willing to go through that, and push through and get good results, show and make the universities proud. So do that, right? Next thing you can do is, if you are someone who is working, you can employ refugees as well, give them that job opportunity. And one thing that we need to know is that refugees are definitely hardworking people, because they are trying to live through, they are trying to make it through a single day, which means that they're going to put in that extra effort. They're going to be, dedicated to the work that they're going to do. And just employing them is definitely something that you can go for. And even, working with them can give them that positive energy, it can give you that positive energy as well, right? So it's something that you can think about. Offer opportunities for refugees to volunteer as well, right? Now the thing is that, you can't some refugees can't work legally in certain countries. So when there is a situation like that, you can provide them with meals, and you can tell them to volunteer, and get them to also engage to learn different skills like painting, weaving, ceramics, cooking, agriculture as well. These are certain things that you can do, and offer them those opportunities, and they can then take on from there as well. Hold awareness and raise fundraising events are definitely something that you can go for as well. This is something that you can easily do. So do keep raising awareness, do speak up about this, donate, make donations if you can do so. Usually, when you are supposed to be having that sort of, how do you say this, when you are, helping with the refugee crisis, you don't always have to, give in big amounts. Like, something you can do is, on a monthly basis, just, make a promise to yourself. 2% at the minimum, or 2% of your, income is going to be going into the refugee crisis, and that is something that you can definitely do, something that you can help out with, and you will be able to make an impact. With that being said, we've actually come to the end of the show. We've been talking about the refugee crisis, we spoke about the problems, and we also spoke about how you have an impact and you can be making that change as well. So stay tuned with the social roundup, because we have Andrea joining us after this, and we will be talking about some interesting topics right here on the social roundup. This is Sala on Relax Radio.